So welcome everybody to this webinar. And today's webinar it's about how to promote a campaign at school, locally through different partners. And during this webinar, we are going to have two presentations from two speakers. Just let me to share the screen and then we can start. Before we will go to the all presentations, I just want to have a bit about technicalities during this webinar. So we would like you to keep yourself muted during the webinar, so to not disturb others. Otherwise, there is a lot of sound and noises going around, and people cannot hear the presenters. Today, during the presentations, there will be no questions. But after the presenters will finish, you can have ask your questions. So then you can unmute yourself. Also, we will be collecting questions on chat, and you can write the question during the whole webinar. But please remember to also add email address to you, so we can ask, we can reply on your question after the webinar if there will be no chance to do it during the webinar. If you wish to have a diploma, please write to me or Shawen. You have contact information on our website. Also, we will be sharing the SurveyMonkey questions after the webinar, just to review this if you like it, and also what kind of topics you would like to have during the webinars in the future. And a recorded webinar will be uploaded on our website by the end of January, because as you know, this is the first webinar from the same topic. And on 28th of January, there will be second opportunity to listen the same webinar with the same presenters. And in February, we will be following with new webinar, how to write a successful story. And you will be able to sign for that webinar by the end of January. Today at the webinar, we will be introduced how to disseminate the stories on local level. Our presenter will be Christopher Slaney, who's a freelance journalist and television news producer with 35 years of experience, mostly in Middle East and Africa. After his presentation, we will have an example of successful dissemination shared by one of our students, Allison Gacad from Canada. And then now I would like to ask our first presenter, Christopher Slaney, to introduce himself and have a presentation.
Okay, so good day everyone, wherever you are, and welcome to the webinar on how to create a campaign using social media. I know I have a habit of talking too fast. And after all, I've only been given 15 minutes to share quite a lot of information with you. So Gosha, if you need me to slow down, please send me a WhatsApp message. I've got it open in front of me. I've prepared a short presentation, which will hopefully work in this Zoom meeting. And as Gosha said, we'll also make it available afterwards. Gosha mentioned my work as a journalist and a TV producer, but I should just add that I think the real reason I'm here today is because I also, year after year, sit on the panel which judges and awards prizes in the YRE competition. Something I very much enjoy doing, and something I learn a lot from. So hopefully I'll be able to spread some knowledge in the opposite direction here today. And now I'm ready to begin this presentation. So let me see if I can get this right. Please be patient with me. See what happens. Okay. Can somebody give me any indication of whether this is working or not?
We don't see it yet. It's a gray screen, which is written, click to exit full screen.
Okay. So what should I do?
Yeah, maybe the same way as you have it done before. You need to kind of bring your presentation into this window.
Yeah. Just a minute. And now?
No.
Okay, I'm going to stop share and start again. Just a moment. How about now?
Not shared yet. There is the green.
Yeah.
Where, yes, something, but we see your windows with different apps.
Yeah.
Not the presentation.
No, that's the wrong one. Okay, for some reason, just a second.
Okay.
And now what do you see?
Black, white screen. It's
And
low
now?
Now it's in.
Oh, eureka.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
my apologies to everybody.
That's okay.
Okay, so here we go. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with scenes like this. Everybody all over the world looking at their screen, because social networks have forever changed the way we interact with each other. New ways of exchanging information and spreading ideas have replaced traditional media really at very breakneck speed. This revolution isn't over yet, and we have no idea of where it's going to end. But in the meantime, if you want to engage as many people as possible in your community, your language, or even reach millions of people across the world, you need more than clicks and likes from people you already know. If you want to be effective, really effective, you must have a campaign that reaches people you don't know, and you've got to get them to pay attention and hopefully take action. And the first step is to ask yourself, what do I want to achieve? Is your campaign going to be a call to action? Do you want to gather followers to watch a video you've made? Subscribe to an online petition? Answer a survey? Get out and demonstrate? Deciding what you want your social media campaign to achieve is the first step, the absolute foundation. So do not go any further until you can answer this question: what do you want to achieve? When you can answer that question, next, choose a name for your campaign. Keep it short and memorable, and get to the point in as few words as possible, like this name. Or maybe this one from last year, short and memorable. Or even this slogan, a controversial one from a few years ago. For the purposes of this webinar, I've decided my social media campaign will be about plastic drinking straws, one of the worst items of single-use plastic. We use and throw away hundreds of millions of drinking straws every day. Think about that for a moment. Hundreds of millions every day. You use one for a minute, and straight away it's in the garbage or on the floor. And my campaign, for the purposes of this webinar, will focus on plastic drinking straws because it's an issue where every single person, irrespective of age, income, or the country they live in, can have an immediate effect, an individual contribution towards solving a global problem. Because nobody actually needs plastic drinking straws. If there were no more straws on this planet tomorrow, nobody would be worse off apart from the people who make, sell, and transport plastic straws. But I believe that even these people who cannot do without them, for example, I understand that there are some people with medical conditions and elderly people who cannot drink unless it's through a straw, they can easily and quickly switch to using something else. So, what do I want to achieve? My campaign will be to raise awareness about the terrible impact plastic drinking straws are having on the environment. How will I do this? Well, I want to spread the message about straws and persuade people to drink without a straw. Get them to tell their friends and their family to drink without a straw, and point out that there are alternatives for people who are worried about bacteria, cans, might have some physical ailment which prevents them from otherwise drinking, like these, drinking straws made from paper or bamboo. Not perfectly biodegradable or recyclable, but a big, big improvement on plastic. Remember step 2? My campaign needs a name. And I need to make sure that nobody is already using that name for anything, a unique name. So I test the originality of the name I choose by searching for it on Google. I need to keep trying lots of different names until I find one that nobody is already using. But of course, in social media, it's unlikely that you'll have a head start on original ideas with your first name. You'll find that somebody is already using it. So I have to think again, and this is the alternative name I come up with. But it's no surprise that my second great idea has also already been taken. So I scratch my head, have a cup of coffee, and think again. I had to test quite a few names until I discovered one that nobody else was using. Once you have a name that tests okay on Google, I encourage you to register a domain in that name as step 3. And this is the only part of this project that will cost money. Perhaps €100 for the first year, and around €8 a month for hosting a website. You don't have to do this, but it could be important in the future. If your campaign is successful, and I mean really successful, someone else will try to steal your idea and your idea's name. So owning the domain protects it. Now my campaign has a goal and a name, and it's time for step 4, creating a social media presence. I create a Google account for the campaign. And once again, I'm doing this partly protect the great name I thought up from being stolen, but also because having a Google account and an email address is a good foundation for the next step. Now, of course, you could arrive at this point and find that somebody else has already got the name you want to use in Google, or is already using your name as part of an email address. If so, you've got to go back 2 steps and think of a new name. But if your name tests okay in Google and in Gmail, you can move on to step 5. And in step 5, I set up accounts in the name of my campaign, not my own name, on each network. I register a Twitter feed, an Instagram account, a YouTube channel, a Facebook page, because I need my campaign to be everywhere. Before I post my first article, tweet, photo, or video, I decide on 10 keywords which are going to be relevant to my campaign, relevant to Straw Story. And this is step 6, keywords. Keywords are the words that will, over time, hopefully, boost your profile with the search engines and drive traffic to your social media postings. When someone searches for information on single-use plastic drinking straws, I want them to find Straw Story. I want them to be directed to my Straw Story Facebook page and Straw Story YouTube channel. Keywords will help Straw Story appear near the top of the search results. And once I have a list of keywords, I stick to them and I do this. I remember to include the keywords in every story I write. In each photo caption and every tweet I upload or send. I list them in the tags that accompany each new YouTube and Instagram video. If visitors to my site send me some of their own stories about straws, I give them a headline which includes my keywords. So, I know what my campaign will be about, and I have a name. I've set up all my accounts, I've created a list of keywords, and now I'm ready to begin. But where and how? Well, I begin everywhere and all at once. This is step 7, the launch. On the first day of my campaign, I'm going to need a story, a photo, or maybe 2, a properly edited piece of video, a tweet, a caption for each photo, and a longer version of the same story. I must establish Straw Story and my presence across as many networks as possible where I've set up an account or already have a profile. I can spread the same message or idea on multiple platforms, but my content has to be adapted specifically for each one. Each social media platform has its own format and rules, and here I've listed a few. Some you might already be familiar with. A quick search on Google or anywhere, any other search engine, will reveal more advice about the best length of social media posts than you can possibly absorb. But choose 1 or 2 of these to read and decide what might be best for you and your campaign. And now we come on to step 8. Choose and edit the photos and videos you are going to upload with care. With so many beautiful and thought-provoking images out there in social media, anything that is less than fantastic is going to get overlooked, and you need to stand out. It's never been easier or cheaper to create great photos, so there's no need to be boring. And don't use images that don't belong to you. Downloading someone else's photos and using them without permission is theft. So don't take any shortcuts. Take your own photos. Remember this one I showed you right at the beginning of the presentation? I didn't take this one, but I asked the photographer, whose name is Jim Hollander, he's well known, permission to use it. And he wrote to me saying, it's okay, I can use it, as long as I acknowledge his copyright in the caption, which I did. So this is a way which you might be using somebody else's photos, but if you do, get their permission. Because once again, if your campaign is successful and spread around the world on various networks, and you've used somebody's material without permission, you could be in trouble. The same rules apply to video. It's never been easier to create it. This is what video cameras used to look like, and this is what they look like today. So there's no excuse for not having good, eye-catching, and original high-quality video. And the same applies to video editing. You have some great tools at your disposal. However, especially with video, make sure you're not breaking the law. For example, if your video shows people under the age of 13, you must have their specific permission to use their faces on YouTube. If your video content is aimed at a young audience, you must click on the correct button in YouTube's terms and conditions. Be careful not to reuse somebody else's video edited in with your own material, because if your campaign is successful, the last thing you need is someone you've upset by using their video coming after you with a lawyer. Also, YouTube will block or delete any video containing music you do not have the right to use. In general, original material is always best. So if you have some friends who are musicians, get them to record you some background music. And in terms of video, keep your video stories simple. You don't have to use all the special effects and all sorts of digital tricks which are available in the app, because you need your audience to get the message of your campaign. They don't need to be impressed at what a clever video editor you are. Let the pictures tell the story. And above all, be prepared to keep your campaign going for as long as possible. Keep it fresh. Keep it interesting. And you plan ahead. Don't use all your best story ideas, your best photos and videos all at once or too close together in time. Decide on a schedule. Maybe you'll post new material once a week, maybe every day, or maybe less than that. Keep a careful record of which videos and photos you've already used. When you know you have some great video or a good batch of photos, edit, write captions, make them look great, and store them away for some future use. In this slide, I showed you 7 popular social networks, but there are more. If you live in China, for example, there are probably another 7 which are more important than these. For example, in China, WeChat has over 1 billion monthly users. And there are other networks, sorry, outside of the 7 I highlighted earlier. LinkedIn is a network popular with working professionals wanting to stay in touch, keep up with other people of similar interests, or look for the next job. But LinkedIn is also divided into groups. And a quick search shows me there's a LinkedIn group with 34,000 members interested in sustainably green environment, corporate social responsibility, and clean energy. I'll bet there are a lot of people among those 30,000 members who would be interested in Straw Story. Reddit is a moderated network some of you might be interested in. Let's say it's generally for more serious and mature content. You can download the app, create a profile, and it's then divided into subreddits. And in each subreddit, each topic, they tell you how many people have signed up for that particular one. So I quickly found 2 subreddits where I think I can find an audience for my Straw Story. One of them, sustainability, has 55,000 members. And finally, always look for interaction with your audience. At the very least, it will give you some feedback on how effective your campaign be. But you could also be building an address list or a database for future projects. Encourage your audience to subscribe to your YouTube channel. If you have a website, measure the number of clicks it's getting. Every time someone reacts to a Facebook post, send them a friend request. I'm going to invite others to contribute and tell their own Straw Story, but I must be critical. If the contributions aren't good enough, if the facts are dubious, or if I think the photos aren't original, I'll turn them down. But if I'm going to use somebody else's story or photo, I'm going to remember to include some of my keywords in their headline or caption. And that is my presentation on how to build yourself a successful social media campaign. Thank you for your attention, and I'll see if I can stop the share.
Perfect.
Back to where we were.
Thank you so much for this. It was a really impressive presentation, and I believe very, very useful to all of us. And before, and also, like, we want people to get them in action. We want convince others to be part of our campaigns, to work with us on environmental issues. And if we do it only with the group of students in school, it will never grow. We will be successful only on a very small field. So that's why we have to remember about our social media and how we can promote and how we can convince all communities actually to be part of our campaign. Before we go to the presentation from Allison, we would like you to ask to go to the mentee.com and use the code 777233 and answer the question, what is the first step to ask yourself when you want to start a campaign? So just for fun, let's be a little interactive during this meeting. You can also use your phone for this. You don't need computer, and maybe we can have some feedback from participants. So like 2 minutes for this. Yeah, maybe we can go with another question. You can still answer on this one. We will be collecting those answers. And we can post the second. What will you take out from this presentation? Fantastic. Thank you very much for this. And now we will go to presentation from Allison. And once again, request to all of you, please keep yourself muted.
Creo que tener un seminario web. Pero este hijo puta marica no tiene.
Hi, everybody.
No, es que esto no trae el huequito para los. Voy a ver si aquí tengo.
Hi, Allison. Could you start? The floor is yours. Yes.
Great. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are all over the world. It's really exciting to go through the chat and see where everybody's from. So I'm really excited to do this presentation. I'll be switching over into a PowerPoint, but I just wanted to go on video just to say hi to everybody. And so you know that there's a face behind the presentation that I'm about to give. So I'll just start to share my screen now. Hopefully this works. Perfect. All right. So as Christopher mentioned as well, I do also have a habit of speaking quite fast. So Gosha, feel free at any time to interrupt me or slow me down. And otherwise, I'll get on with the presentation. So my name is Allison Gacad. I'm from Canada. And as Gosha mentioned, I'm actually an alumni of the Young Reporters for the Environment program. So in Canada, YRE is facilitated by environmental defense, at least it was during my time. And now environmental defense has transferred over YRE Canada to Eco Schools Canada. So I'll start off with a brief outline of what I'll be talking about today. First beginning with an introduction, and then moving on to my YRE journey to profile my path as a journalist, beginning in high school. Then I'll be drawing parallels between the scientific and the journalistic method, and then I'll briefly discuss the value in having multiple publishing outlets and therefore multiple audiences, and then end off with some conclusions and some really valuable resources. So to begin introducing myself again, my name is Allison Gacad. I'm a Filipino-Canadian and I won the YRE Canada 2015 competition in the article writing category from, I believe it's 14 to 18. And as a YRE, I've been really lucky to have had the opportunity to go to COP23, which is the United Nations Climate Change Conference in 2016 as a YRE journalist, and also to be trained in UNESCO's Education for Sustainable Development the same year in Portugal. I'm also a writer on YRE's blog, also known as the YRE Hub. But outside of YRE, I'm actually pursuing a Bachelor's of Science in Global Resource Systems, where my research interests are in crop science. And I'm also a writer for the university newspaper, most often the science section, but most recently, I've taken on a position as a One Earth Journalist Fellow through Climate Tracker and the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation. So I guess one interesting question to think about is, how did I get to where I am today? And I guess I can profile that journey by really starting in high school, where I began to explore as a journalist, primarily thanks to YRE. And then in university, I pushed myself to go beyond my comfort zone and beyond what I knew as a journalist, to explore a little bit more at my university. And beyond, I'm now working on integrating journalism as part of my professional career as both a scientist and a journalist, most likely a science journalist. So to start off in high school, I attended high school in Scarborough, which is an area of Toronto in Canada. And I won the Wiry Canada 2015 competition through profiling my environmental council's efforts to properly sort waste. Specifically because so many things were going in the garbage that shouldn't have, but thanks to the environmental council at my school, they implemented some solutions that allowed that to improve. One key element to my growth as a journalist in high school was that Wiry Canada provided the opportunity for me to attend a skill developing workshop at the University of Toronto. And here at this workshop, I was able to work with a real full-time journalist in Toronto who's writing on environmental issues. Following that workshop, I continued to write for my high school newspaper, particularly on local environmental initiatives and events, and I was able to reach a local audience of 1,400 students, as well as those in the local community. And then for university, I decided to attend university on the other side of Canada in Vancouver, which is about a 5-hour flight from Toronto. In an entirely new environment, especially as a science student, I was taking biology and chemistry and physics courses, and I was able to get to know my professors who were also researchers at the same time. And I found that they were doing very important and very interesting work. But a lot of it was inaccessible because a lot of it was tied up in scientific jargon and only really accessible to their students. And so what I decided to do was to work and learn from my student newspaper so I could effectively learn how to communicate this science and to communicate this important news. And so I published a series of articles profiling the important work that's happening at UBC, ranging from honeybee research to engineering, aerospace engineering research. And it was really an exciting opportunity to get to know the research that's happening at UBC and why it's important for the world. Of course, because this was for my university community, I was able to reach a broader audience beyond just my science classmates. The population at UBC is about 70,000 students, staff, faculty, and general visitors. So that newspaper is accessible to them through both a print and as well as an online article format. In university, especially as a science student, I found that there are actually a lot of parallels between the scientific and journalistic method. And I think this is important to map out because it sort of breaks down how I've approached articles and how I've also approached scientific research. I think the first step really is creativity. In science, you need to come up with a hypothesis or an educated guess about an observation. In journalism, you need a pitch or an idea for a good piece. In both realms, I think the question is, what makes a good story and what makes for a good conclusion? And the next step is vigor. So this is where you have to work quite hard, whether you're running experiments or reporting and transcribing interviews. The basis is, what is your evidence to prove your hypothesis or your pitch? And lastly, you need to communicate it well. So this is about putting all the pieces together, and depending on your audience, you need to communicate your results and you need to publish it clearly. And so personally, I believe that these steps are crucial to good journalism, which is why my career as a scientist has also helped my career as a journalist and vice versa. Taking on this approach really helped me to succeed in receiving a few Wiry opportunities. So as a Wiry alumni, we're really lucky to be part of the Wiry network. And from time to time, Wiry will send out emails with opportunities to travel abroad or attend international conferences. And in 2016, Wiry sent out an inquiry to see if anybody was interested and eligible to attend both COP23 and a UNESCO training. And so I applied on behalf of Wiry Canada, and I was lucky enough to receive those opportunities. But I think what I really want to highlight from receiving those opportunities is that I approached them with these same 3 strategies. So my first strategy was to publish with multiple outlets. When I knew I got the opportunity, I knew that it was a great privilege, and so I contacted Wiry Canada, Environmental Defense, Alternatives Journal, which is a Canadian environmental magazine, my local newspaper, the UBC, as well as some Vancouver outlets, as well as some self-publishing, to really diversify my audiences and to make the most of these international experiences that I would pursue. My second strategy was to have multiple forms of engagement. So traditionally, I'm a writer, an article writer through and through, but I found that at COP23, I decided to move beyond my comfort zone and take on the opportunity to speak on a UNESCO panel, as well as to do some social media such as Instagram Live, as well as some tweets on Twitter as well. And lastly, after each opportunity, I took the initiative to bring it back home. So I brought this back home in a series of workshops and panels at my university in collaboration with sustainability clubs. So I talked about climate migration, sustainable development, and science communication to really share my experiences abroad back with my home university at UBC. So the reason why I did all this was to ensure that these opportunities that Wiry's provided wasn't just for me. And as a journalist, it's really your role to sort of amplify, to be a microphone and amplify issues that you feel are important and that need to be told. And so by taking on these multiple strategies, I really found a means of doing so. So moving on to more present, I guess, roles that I have. So my most current opportunity is with Climate Tracker, which is an organization that trains climate journalists, which is very similar to Wiry, but less focused on youth, and the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation through their One Earth initiative, which is where they're interested in publishing climate solutions. So as a One Earth Fellow, I publish monthly articles on North American climate solutions with international readership, particularly from those who are already interested in climate news. And to become a fellow, I published an article on the Wiry Hub, which was reviewed by Gosha and Christina, and I submitted to Climate Tracker. And after they read my application, I was selected. So this is another example of how the Wiry network and the Wiry platforms and resources can really be beneficial and useful in your own personal growth as a journalist. The last outlet that I think is very meaningful to me and impactful, as well as my own personal travel blog and Medium, which I both self-publish. Now, these pieces are less journalistic and more creative nonfiction and personal essay style, and really the impact is more local. The people who are reading this are those in my family, friends, and close professional network, but I find that they're good ways to share intimate stories, and the people who do read it reach out to me personally and say how impactful they were for them. So overall, I just want to hammer home the point about why it's important to diversify your publishing. From scoping the numerous publishing outlets or realms that I try to go through, such as my local Vancouver University community, my family, friends, and close network, the International Wiry Network, as well as the One Earth International Network as well. It's really important to diversify your publishing, to establish yourself as a journalist, and also promote the articles that you're writing and to get better readership so more people are conscious of these issues and the articles that you're producing. To end off this presentation, I think I'd just like to go through some conclusions that I've come to as a result of my Wiry journey thus far. First off, I find that if you work hard, opportunities will surprise you. It's also important, though, that you can't expect opportunities to just fall at your lap. You really need to work hard, but with your hard work, people do eventually recognize you and your hard work. And opportunities may come up in the form of an email or a phone call or a network or somebody thinking of you. So keep working hard and something will surely shine through. I think as a journalist, and particularly through Wiry, Another piece of advice that I have is to start local and then go global. As I mentioned before, being a journalist is really an opportunity to be a microphone to issues that you feel are necessary and important to be amplified. And the best way to do this is to look at your own home community and really try to figure out what are those issues and what are those solutions and problems that need to happen. And the last issue I do want to drive home, which is a little bit not traditional, but from my perspective, I think that, journalism school isn't necessary to be a journalist. I think that studying different disciplines can be just as powerful and effective. In my case, I found a lot of effectiveness through studying science. And there are places like Wiry and Climate Tracker, which provide training for you to grow as a journalist. So you don't necessarily need to attend traditional school to do so when you have the Wiry network that has webinars like this to help train you. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I just want to share some good resources that have come through along the way. The International Journalists Network newsletter is a great newsletter that they send out weekly with opportunities depending on your region of the world, if you're from Africa or Asia or the Middle East or Europe. Climate Tracker is also a great platform for opportunities specifically for climate journalism, and they do great work, and it's also in multiple languages as well. They primarily focus on English, French, and Spanish. Climate Optimist is a good newsletter for more positive climate solutions and climate news, and it's published by the Harvard School of Public Health. And lastly, an outlet that I'm a big fan of and that I mentioned throughout this presentation is Medium. I think it's a great way to self-publish, and it has its own readership and its own audience as well. So you could publish an article and share it with your personal network, but also Medium's network as well. So to end off this presentation, I just want to end off with a quote that Gosha said at our last Education for Sustainable Development training, and that's, once you're a Wiry, you're always a Wiry. In my case, I won the competition back in high school, and I'm well out of high school now, but Wiry is still very much a big component of my life, and it's made me into the journalist that I am today. I've left some of my social media platforms on there if you ever want to get in contact or have any questions. I'd be happy to answer as best as I can, and I'm looking forward to any questions that all of you may have. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Allison. It was really fantastic presentation, and I think very interesting point of view that you don't need to be a journalist to spread your messages around and convince people also to take an action. So I think it's a fantastic approach and experience that you got through the years of being part of Young Reporters for the Environment Network. But it can be any network that is locally as well through your school, and whenever you are in each country, you can reach the point when your story can be visible globally as well. And I would like to give an opportunity for, at the moment, to different participants to ask questions to our presenters, and we can have a few minutes for it. If you have any question, you can unmute yourself and ask directly Christopher or Allison or other people to share the experience that you have. I have one question to Allison, actually. When you were writing some articles in the past and something about litter, waste, or some other stories, did you find out any influence on local people that were reading it? Any change that happened, or anything that someone was convinced to take an action or start doing something or be aware about environmental issues?
Yeah, I think those reactions of immediate and direct change came from publishing in my local outlets. So in high school, when I published the Wiry article, I had I do remember people coming up to me and saying, wow, I had no idea that our high school had this issue. I'm going to be more conscious of it now, and I'm going to take better action. In university, there was discussion amongst the journalists talking about how they were so surprised that there was a sort of research that was going on at UBC, in example, honeybee research talking about how threatened honeybees are in Vancouver and how they wanted to take on a better consciousness. And I think it's hard to quantify exactly how many people maybe change their actions or change their ways, but it is very powerful when you're publishing for a local audience, for local participants, or for locals to come up to you and say, oh, this article made me think differently. And I think that's the power really in local publishing and local writing about issues and solutions, is that when the local audience reads it, they'll be able to connect directly and they'll be able to understand and therefore choose to make a difference or an impact.
Thank you so
I'd
much.
just like to interject and say, don't expect instant reactions. Don't look to be an overnight sensation. Somebody will remember something they've heard or they've seen or they've logged into and watched a few days down the calendar, or next week or next month. And I think that changing people's perception or getting an audience engaged over time is sometimes better than it just being a flash in a pan, a piece of disposable news that somebody will look at and then throw away. And that harks back to my last point of my presentation, saying you've got to be in this for the long run. Don't just publish one piece or put out one photo or one tweet and expect it to do the job. Be ready for a sustained campaign, whether it's in traditional media or in social media. People would rather have a series than a one-off, as it were.
Yes, exactly. That's also my point, that to be successful, we have to keep doing things. Do not give up, and at some point it will also turn to be successful. Is there any question coming from the audience? If not, we will also again launch Mentimeter with 2 questions to keep a little more interactive before we will finish this presentation.
Gosia, can I ask a question?
Sure, go.
Question to Chris and maybe to Allison as well. It's Daniel from FEE. What about, especially Chris, your presentation was, you were dealing with social media platforms. What about managing the discussion afterwards? Because how much energy do you put into that? And how do you sieve through what is noise and what is worth answering and relating to after your stories out?
Okay, that's a very good question, and I would say before I tell you about how do you manage the discussion afterwards, I have to point out that you must be prepared for criticism. You might be in a situation where you need a pretty thick skin once you've posted material on social media. There are people out there who are going to dispute what you're saying in no uncertain terms and use some very bad language. For example, I discovered while I was doing a little bit of research into plastic drinking straws for something else, that just as there are people who think that the earth is flat and that there's no such thing as global warming, there are people who dispute the fact that hundreds of millions of plastic drinking straws going into the ocean, the beach, and the landfill every day is a bad thing. So you must be ready for criticism. And one of the ways you can get ready for criticism is to be sure that you're only using reliable and verified facts and data. Don't go quoting popularly assumed facts and figures about anything, because you will get found out. And if you're quoting someone, make sure you attribute that quote. Now, to address the main point of your question, this ties into also what I was saying about be ready for the long run. Have plenty of material in in reserve, in the background. Have a good catalog with which you can keep your campaign alive. How much you actually want to engage in the discussion as it goes forward is really up to you. Ideally, you start the ball rolling and get similarly interested parties, whether they're pro or con, whether they're the trolls or the fans, to start talking amongst themselves. A successful campaign, apart from getting people to take action, gets people to start discussing it with others.
Yeah, exactly. That's also so important point, to let people to discuss with others, and yeah, to make it also interesting, like a topic to be discussed, not controversial like you mentioned, but even from positive action to let people interested in this.
But there will always be controversy, always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. Yeah, whatever. we will write on that. Yes.
I'd also, just a second, I'd also like to point out to all the participants who are still with us that even though I chose for the purpose of the webinar an issue which I think has global significance, your social media campaign might be much more local, even less than a national level, maybe only concerning your town or your university campus or your county, your state, or whatever. It might be something to do with local air quality or the cleanliness of the river or the way your city is dealing with some particular issue.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we will need to head into the finish of this meeting. And I want to point once again that this presentation will be recorded and placed on our website for people who want to watch it by the end of January. But please share also with your friends, students, that this webinar will be repeated on 28th of January at 9 a.m. Central European time. So you will be able also to participate, and maybe someone who couldn't join today and can do it in 2 weeks. And also remember that those webinars are running every month, and next month there will be another webinar, how to tell successful story. So stay in touch with us, and thank you so much for today. We will be sending you information about SurveyMonkey and some questions to help us to improve for the future. Thank you, and bye-bye for today.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank
you for paying attention.
Thank you.